Adopted. The first reading.
The EU will now hold migrants in offshore detention centres after the European Parliament approved its strictest ever migration law. Right-wing MEPs burst into chants of send them back after winning the vote.
Adopted. The first reading.
The deportation hubs will allow the EU to detain migrants with no right to be in the EU for an indefinite period or until they can be returned to their home country. Only unaccompanied minors would be exempt, meaning families with children could be held in the so-called return hubs. MEPs from the centre-right, the right-wing and the hard-right teamed up to push through the bill, which won by 418 votes to 218. As a Conservative bloc begins to emerge in the Parliament on migration issues.
On the agenda, the report by Mrs. Brigmont on the EU-Pakistan Agreement modification of concessions on tariff freight quotes. Vote on consent by roll call vote. The vote is open.
The EU will now have the power to set up agreements with external countries to house the deportation centres, as well as the ability to search the properties of suspected migrants. A key provision, in theory, allows the bloc to deport migrants while their appeals are ongoing, ending the current system where deportations are automatically halted while an appeal goes through. However, courts will retain the ability to do this on individual cases. Migrants can now be detained before deportation for up to 2 years, up from the current 6 months, and for an unlimited time period for those considered a security risk. Entry bans will be toughened, up from 5 to 10 years for those entering the EU illegally, with the possibility of a lifetime ban for those considered a security risk. Socialists and left-wing parties could be heard shouting "Shame on you" as MEPs celebrated their win.
We move to the... It's adopted.
The move will be welcomed in Britain despite the Labour government's decision to scrap the similar Rwanda scheme. Any cut in illegal immigration to Europe should see a drop in crossings from Calais. Over 200,000 small boat migrants have entered Britain since 2018, which has hit records since Labour came to power. Reports indicate smuggling gangs have expanded their operations to launch crossings to Britain from Belgium. Nick Dunning, GB News.
GB News exclusive now from Mark White, our Homeland Security editor. We can bring you footage exclusively of the French Navy throwing life jackets to illegal immigrants, making a small boat crossing in the Channel. Here's what happened.
One here.
So you can see there brazenly, that is the French authorities throwing life jackets to illegal immigrants mid-channel. You might say that's a humanitarian act, but it's also, some might say, aiding and abetting the illegal crossings. This comes, of course, as criminal gangs sent hundreds of illegal migrants on a dangerous 22-hour crossing overnight. We can see, however, that today some French police have been attempting to stop migrants trying to board a taxi boat in Burke in northern France, with migrant vessels setting off further along the coastline to escape French authorities. Well, I'm delighted now to be joined by Azir Yousef, the Reform UK Home Affairs spokesman, who joins me. Azir Yousef, thank you for waiting patiently there as Emmanuel Macron survived a press conference with Donald Trump. What are your thoughts on the brazen handing out of life jackets mid-channel by the French authorities?
Well, it is remarkable that we are now seeing footage of the French authorities, literally handing life jackets to illegal migrants, thus encouraging them to make the journey. And I think there's now journeys of up to 22 hours being made in order to come to Britain illegally. Remember, these are people not coming from Syria or from Gaza. They're coming from France, which last I checked was not a war zone. If it is, then somebody should tell the millions of British people that go there on holiday every summer. And this is what should really make you angry, right? The idea that the French are not going to craftily and sneakily try and offload these people onto Britain. Britain. I mean, of course, that's what would be in their national interest, wouldn't it? Otherwise, they'd be staying in France and costing the French taxpayer money. The people to direct your anger toward is our witless and treacherous political leaders who, remember, have paid, the Tory and Labour governments, have paid the French government 700 million quid of your money, your taxpayers' money, to the French government, ostensibly to stop the boats from coming. And not only are they not stopping the boats, they're coming in near record numbers and have been since that deal was struck and all that money keeps getting paid. They are literally encouraging them to make this journey. And this is not news. I mean, do you remember those photos of French border control literally taking photos on their phones as they saw off illegal boats to come to Britain across the channel? So, look, it's about time we had a proper government in this country that's going to stand up for our interests. And, you know, what Reform would do is immediately stop those payments and put in a demand to the French government for a full refund, given they basically made fraudulent misrepresentations and obtained that money through essentially fraudulent means. But again, the frustration and anger you should direct it at our awful political leaders. Firstly, the Tories who created this mess, and now Labour that are accelerating it.
So, Yusuf, an incredible story in the Telegraph. We're seeing here SERCO, of course, that's the government's housing contractor, the one that buys up the cheap housing across the nation and puts them into HMOs, illegal immigrants, asylum seekers put into them, is taking you on, saying that they would go against your position of deporting illegal immigrants.
Yeah, this is extraordinary. I've written to the chief executive of SERCO, to be fair, to allow him to clarify his position, because the reporting in the Telegraph says that SERCO would take issue with a reform government's mass deportation programme. Now, for context, as you say, SERCO makes £1.7 billion just from UK government contracts every year. And it's not just, you know, the bidding of HMOs, the houses of multiple occupancy, bidding 30-40% above market rates, so that local residents have been given Section 21 eviction notices, including veterans. In one case, I know one of those poor veterans suffering from PTSD evicted, also that the Home Office, assisted by SERCO, could house illegal migrants there. SERCO at no point have uttered any concerns about the morality of that, or the fact that they are, of course, depositing men from Afghanistan, Syria, Iran and Iraq into UK housing estates without the knowledge or consent of local people. Some of those, of course, have gone on to commit unspeakable crimes against those local residents. And so it's extraordinary, if the Telegraph's report is correct, that they would take exception to a government duly elected by the British people, by the way, who say, you know what, we should actually uphold immigration law and remove those who break it. And so what I've said in the letter is, if Reform do not get a response clarifying SERCO's position on this matter to our satisfaction by 6 p.m. tomorrow, it will become Reform Party policy to terminate every SERCO government contract by the end of our first term in government. We have had enough of British taxpayers being taken for mugs, and the tail will not wag the dog. Private companies, it is not for private companies to think that they can set up a separate power base to the duly elected government of the United Kingdom. And I'm afraid if SERCO's position is, as the Telegraph suggests, then any reasonable interpretation of that would suggest SERCO is in fact a threat to national security.
OK, well, Zia Youssef, in response to your claims, we have contacted SERCO for a right of reply. I'd like to read it to you now and get your response. SERCO Group's Chief Executive Anthony Kirby has sent a response to your claims. His letter says this: to clarify our position following reporting in yesterday's Sunday Telegraph, inaccuracies in the article have been changed following our representation. As a matter of long-standing company policy, SERCO does not take political positions, nor do we comment on the policy programmes of political parties. Zia Youssef, it also adds policy decisions on matters for whatever party is in government. Zia Youssef, what's your response to that?
Well, I'm glad that they have, in response to my letter, clarified their position. And I couldn't agree more that it is not for private companies, including and especially government contractors that make enormous amounts of money, ultimately from the British taxpayer, to moralise about these things. So I'm glad that they've clarified their position, but it doesn't change the fact that, you know, far too much of Britain's security apparatus is outsourced. In fact, SERCO actually are now responsible for recruiting our armed forces. even the recruitment of our soldiers has been outsourced to SERCO. So we're going to have to take a look at all of that. But look, we're going to keep making these points. And if any private company thinks, particularly, if a government contractor thinks that they can speak to the press and essentially say that they're going to take partisan political views and go against a duly elected government, which is what we would be if we won the next general election, then they've got another thing coming.
OK, Aziz, thank you for joining us on the show today. Appreciate your time. As ever, thank you for joining us, Zia Youssef. Now let's continue the debate now, returning to GB News exclusive footage from Mark White of the French authorities handing out migrant life jackets in the middle of the Channel. I'm delighted to be joined by the political commentator Matthew Stadlen. Matthew Stadlen, you no doubt saw the footage there. What's your take?
Martin, I only wish I could have gone head-to-head with Zia Youssef there, because I'm afraid he was spouting nonsense. He was talking about record numbers, wasn't he? Well, we know that year on year, it's been down 40% migrant crossings. We also know that as of last month, at least, the French were stopping two-thirds of the boats. So this idea that the French are doing nothing is clearly and demonstrably false. He also talked, Martin, which you let him say unchallenged. He talked about the treacherous political class. He knows what he's doing there, calling fellow politicians, in their case is actually elected politicians, Conservatives and Labour politicians, who go into politics. I might disagree with some of what they stand for, particularly with the Tories, but they go into politics, broadly speaking, to do the right thing. I would suggest all of them do. And to call them traitors to this country is a truly outrageous thing to say, and shows just the
just the word, Matthew. It's just the word, and people might agree with it.
I'm using words now. You're using words. That's what we do, as well as with pictures on TV. We use words. Words have consequences, and I think for him, he styles himself as the Shadow Home Secretary. He's going to be ultimately in charge of law and order in this country if reform, heaven forbid, were to win at the next election, or to head up some form of coalition. And for him to be talking about fellow politicians as traitors is truly outrageous. As for the handing out of these life jackets at sea, Zia Youssef will know, and I'd be extremely surprised if he's unaware of this, he will know that there is a legal duty, as well, of course, as a moral duty, that if you see someone, if you're a boat and you see someone in distress at sea, you help them. And we know that those boats are treacherous dinghies. It is government policy, this government's policy and Tory government policy before that, to stop these boats. Clearly the French are starting to make some inroads, but to suggest that it wouldn't be a good thing to help people in distress at sea is just yet another outrageous comment, Martin.
Matthew Stadlen, you get very exercised about words.
I do, because we're talking about human life.
Hang on, mate. You get very exercised about words that Zia Youssef uses about other parliamentarians, but, there's a lot of bad words get thrown Reform UK's way. They're just words. Let's get back to the actions of what we're seeing in the Channel here. Now, you might say that it's the duty of any nation to help those in peril at sea, and international law, and maybe that's a problem, may agree. You may also say the French should be stopping any of these boardings in the first place. Then there'd be no need for a life jacket if the French actually did their job and stopped the boats. And you say that the numbers are down. The numbers are down due to weather conditions, ostensibly, and we're still at one of the all-time high years. The boats aren't stopping.
Sorry. You're speculating as to the reasons why the numbers are down. We don't know.
It's the weather. Sure. I keep a close eye on them.
We don't know. Let me just answer your points. We don't know, Martin, for sure what the reasons are. We do know, because that's what we learned in the Times overnight, that last month the French stopped two-thirds of boats. I want the French to take every single person. I want the French to take everyone back. If they did that, this issue would stop.
Good. On that, we can agree. Matthew, I'm being told we have to move along. It's always a pleasure to have you. It really is. Matthew Stadlen, thank you for joining us today. Now, still to come, the Royal Marines